Hello there, and welcome to Esri Canada's webinar on the new ArcGIS Pro tools for crime analysis. Thank you for being here. I'm David Hamilton. I'm the Industry Manager for Public Safety, and joining me on the webinar today is my Esri Canada colleague, Pierre Bilodeau. He's our Industry Manager for Defense and Security. And we have a special guest with us today, Chris Delaney. Chris is Esri's law enforcement technical lead, and unfortunately for Chris, he'll be doing much of the heavy lifting for this webinar today. So a few notes for you to get most out of the webinar. When you joined, you were automatically connected to the audio broadcast, which lets you listen on your computer. If you prefer to use the phone, just click the request phone button in the participant window and dial in using the instructions provided in the pop-up window. For the best view of the presentation and the demos, you can maximize the screen with the full screen button. At any time, you can return to the original view with the return button in the top tab. If you have any questions about the content we're presenting, please use the Q&A panel. Just choose to ask all panelists, and then type your question in the box and click send. We will look to answer all the questions at the end of the webinar. So the agenda for today, first off, Pierre will present what to know about ArcGIS Pro. Following that, Chris and I will give an overview of the crime analysis solution. Chris will follow that up with a demo and a deep dive of the solution. And then he will talk about deploying the solution as well. Following that, I'll discuss the crime analyst extension versus the crime analysis solution. Then Pierre and Chris will present related Esri resources, and then we'll finish up with questions. So on that note, I'm going to hand things over to Pierre, and he's going to take it from here on ArcGIS Pro. Pierre.
Thank you, Dave. Since these tools will only work on ArcGIS Pro, so what do you need to know application included with your ArcGIS desktop license? Since we launched it in early 2017, it has become our flagship desktop application. It's a more modern application that will work much better with the rest of our ArcGIS platform, including ArcGIS Online, ArcGIS Enterprise, and our vast library of ready-to-use applications. So what are the benefits of using ArcGIS Pro? Well, Pro is a 64-bit software, so it was built for maximum performance, faster processing, smooth map display, slick 3D scene rendering. It's also a multi-thread application, so you can do multiple things at once. It uses a simplified and more intuitive ribbon user interface, very similar to the Microsoft Office applications that you're used to. And this is where you'll find most of your tools and commands on your toolbars. So there's no need to search and right-click to find your tools. Pro can also design and edit data in 2D and 3D all in one place, and can work with multiple display and layout design at the same time. Pro is also connected to your web GIS and can publish your finished products directly to ArcGIS Online or portal for ArcGIS, so sharing, viewing, and accessing data from your online content is much easier in Pro. Finally, Pro includes, that you'll see today, all kinds of new analytical tools, enhanced search capabilities, and much more. So why change to Pro? As I mentioned earlier, it's now our flagship desktop GIS product. It includes all the primary functionalities of a desktop GIS, and our focus for all future development at Esri for the desktop will be on Pro. So there are new tools that are only going to be available in Pro, like the one you're going to see today, but we have new machine learning algorithms for spatial analysis, new task animation, new online tools, and we're working in the near future on presentation and reporting tool. Pro also include new symbol style sets for local government and also new color schemes. And overall, it's got better performance, it's more flexible, and it's easier to use with your web GIS environment. So where are we now? So ArcGIS Pro 2.2 was released last June and includes many functionalities and new features. And as you see here, some of them, for example, you can slice through your content now in your scenes using planes or volumetric shapes. You can play and analyze full motion video data if you have the ArcGIS Image Analyst extension. And any user, any of you with their maintenance up to date can install ArcGIS Pro now for free, which also comes with a complimentary name user for ArcGIS Online or Portal. And I can also mention that you can install Pro on your machine without affecting your current ArcMap license. I'll turn over back now to Dave for the next part. Over to you, Dave.
All right, thanks, Pierre. So we're going to just give you an overview of the new crime analyst solution for ArcGIS Pro before Chris gets into that deep dive. So firstly, what is a solution? A solution is a collection of related maps, apps, and tools that are both configurable and extensible and are freely available and supported. Solutions enable you to quickly deliver maps and apps across or throughout your organization, providing a roadmap of standard capabilities, improving service delivery, and expanding the reach and promoting innovation throughout the organization. Lastly, it allows you to stay current with future releases, thereby avoiding legacy technology. This saves you both time and money while leveraging new ArcGIS offerings, and enables you to focus on more complex and unique problems. For those of you not checked out Esri's solution site at solutions.arcgis.com, you really should. On the solution site, you'll find solutions for nearly every industry, and those are outlined in red below, and I've expanded it here for your viewing pleasure. We have solutions from government, and that being local and state or provincial in this case, through to emergency management, water, electric, gas, defense, and parks and gardens. Many of these have subcategories of solutions, such as local government, which has specific solutions for land records, public works, fire services, and of course, law enforcement. Again, as you can see here, the link to the solution site is solutions.arcgis.com. So, talking about Esri's law enforcement solutions, and the full link to the law enforcement solutions page is at the bottom right there. We have a number of solutions that enable you to create incident maps, perform predictive analytics, manage tactical operations, perform cell phone analysis, and there's a whole suite of solutions to tackle the opioid epidemic as well. And there's one for setting up public-facing crime maps. And then, of course, the one we're talking about today is the crime analysis tools for ArcGIS Pro. And there are other tools coming along as well. So those would be special events operations, crime control operations, and then down the road, of course, the next version of this solutions toolbar. And with that, I'm going to hand things over to Chris, and he's going to take it from here on to more of a deep dive and demo. Over to you, Chris.
Thanks, Dave, and good afternoon or good morning, everyone, depending on where you are. My name is Chris Delaney. I'm the Law Enforcement Technical Lead at Esri. My role at Esri is to help law enforcement agencies understand how to apply Esri's technology to law enforcement and national security workflows. And my background prior to joining Esri was at the Rochester, New York Police Department, where I was an intelligence analyst. I ran a regional crime analysis center, and I ended up in the command staff as the Director of Business Intelligence. So I've worn a lot of different hats in law enforcement analytics. And I'm really pleased to be with you today to show off our latest solution for law enforcement, the Crime Analysis Toolbar. This was released in July. This is the first release, as Dave mentioned. And we put together this toolbar solution for a number of core reasons. First and foremost, as both Dave and Pierre mentioned, our flagship desktop GIS software, which drives the operations of most crime analysts, both in Canada, in the United States, and across the world, it's an essential tool. And changing from ArcMap, which most of you are used to using for your regular analytic workflows, into ArcGIS Pro, a whole new different piece of software with different feels, with different feel and different locations of tools, can be confusing and challenging to make that change. So what we wanted to do to help analysts move from ArcMap to the next generation of desktop GIS is to provide a toolbar that organizes all of the key tools that they use on a regular day-to-day basis into one location to make it easier to learn new desktop GIS in the form of ArcGIS Pro. So to help those of you who are longtime desktop GIS users to move to the next generation of desktop GIS. And then secondly, also to help new analysts learn desktop GIS for the first time. We often hear that it's very challenging for new analysts who are just starting off, or even analysts who only occasionally use GIS, to get back into desktop GIS because it's such a robust piece of software that it can often be kind of challenging to get your head around the sequencing of steps that you have to do and where you find tools. And lastly, many of you in Canada are existing users of the Esri UK Crime Analyst extension for ArcMap. As Esri UK continues to support that extension for the near future in ArcMap, we've wanted to talk to Esri UK about how we can support those capabilities that their customers have been utilizing that extension for, but in a free-to-utilize solution from Esri. And so what we've tried to do as much as possible in building this toolbar is identify the most commonly used aspects of the Crime Analyst extension from Esri UK that many of you in Canada are using, and try to incorporate as much functionality as we could. So those are the kind of three main reasons that we put together this solution. And this solution is simply a toolbar for ArcGIS Pro, and I'll show you in just a minute. We'll go over all the new custom tools that are in it. And it really is a combination of not only existing out-of-the-box ArcGIS Pro tools that you'll find and are used to working with, but we've also built some new tools, hopefully to make your life as an analyst easier. And those are tools across the entire analytic process, from managing data to performing selections to new forms of analysis that maybe you had to do previously outside of GIS, or that took you a really long time to do using GIS, simplifying those processes, and then ultimately to delivering information products in the form of maps, either hard copy or online maps. So the most important thing to know about it is the solution is free. If you're an existing ArcGIS Pro user, you've got access to it today and you can start working with it. And it is only for ArcGIS Pro. There's no equivalent toolbar for ArcMap. The only way you can get this particular toolbar is through ArcGIS Pro. So if you haven't made the jump into the pool of ArcGIS Pro, hopefully this is a good incentive for you to do that. So I was going to walk through some slides that get into the particulars of each of the sections of the toolbar, but I think just to keep things going fast, I want to start to just share my screen now, and we can take a look at the live toolbar itself. So now you should be seeing my desktop, and on my desktop is ArcGIS Pro, and displayed at the top is the Crime Analysis Toolbar. As Pierre mentioned, ArcGIS Pro, if you haven't seen it already, follows the standard modern Windows ribbon interface. So when you add this new solution into ArcGIS Pro, it displays as a ribbon on the main ribbon tab. You may have seen ArcGIS Pro previously, and what you're looking at on my screen doesn't make sense to you because it's all with a dark theme. There's actually a functionality in the project heading under Options to change the theme of ArcGIS Pro from light to dark, and that's simply what I have on. So it's the same application that you may have seen in other places, but in this particular instance, it is dark mode instead of light mode. So as I mentioned, what we tried to do with the crime analysis toolbar is to deliver a series of capabilities that help improve analytic workflows across the entire sequence of crime analysis. So tools, if you look at the ribbon, it's organized by that workflow. Tools to help you manage data, to import and to standardize, to organize data, to then perform selections on that data, to then perform a variety of different common analytics on that data, and then lastly, once you've created some kind of analytic product, to deliver that as an end form information product. So I want to go through each of the individual tools here, highlight where we have out-of-the-box tools and where we have new tools. And when we have new tools, I want to show you an example of what that new tool does. In data management, the core tools that we've put in place to the ribbon are pretty straightforward. Add data, bringing in data from a local file, being able to take a table that you've brought in and render it as points on a map. So if you already have XYs, for example, if you have only addresses, being able to geocode that data. And then we got some new tools that help you standardize data and organize data in ways that make sense. The first and main set of those is located under a group called Enhance Attributes. And for the most part, there's a combination of new tools and out-of-the-box tools. The first tool that I wanted to highlight is actually an existing out-of-the-box tool that many analysts don't know about. It's called the Convert Time field. And my experience as an analyst, and maybe you've had the same experience, is when you pull in data that comes in from a records management system, a CAD system, or some other system, you might find that you have date values that come in like this. This is a set of arrests, and I have my dates, and they come in as text, where you can see this is 2018, January 24th, and this is the hours, minutes, seconds of that time. And it can be a real pain to have to take that data and reorganize it so that it now becomes a date-time field in ArcGIS. What the Enhance Attributes Convert Time field lets you do is select an input table, select the field that value is in, describe a input time format. So you input a time format that matches what you're seeing here. By default, it recognized that I have my time just jammed in. But if you've got dashes or whatever your data looks like, you can modify this to fit it, and then you can run the tool, and it will create a new date value for you. It's pretty cool, pretty handy. Likewise, we have some other tools in here, Convert Coordinate Notation. So if you've got state plane data in the United States, for example, and you need to convert it to WGS, you've got some sort of projected data that you need to convert to a coordinate system, a geographic coordinate system, you can do that. And then some handy little tools around organizing and enriching data. So first, the ability to extract a date part to a field. So once you have a date that's valid, so in my got a data set with a valid date value here, arrest date, I can then simply select these various date parts, run the tool, and it will create a new field in my existing data set with the equivalent date part for the value that it finds in the arrest date field. There's a couple of reasons why this is handy. A, it saves you having to write some long, complicated expressions. And let's take a look at what that actually looks like. So here is a result of that data where I have a record, and it has an arrest date of 1/28/2018, 1:41 p.m. I've run the tool, and I've gotten back into the same data set that I put into the tool, so not another output data set, the same set. That makes it easier to work with your data. It's created new fields. It's created a weekday field, an hour field, a month field, a day field, and a year field. So very handy for if you need that data to be able to do queries off of, to create charts, if you're anticipating building a dashboard and you want to be able to create charts off on the dashboard off of those individual things or symbolized differently, it's much easier now to create those date parts than it was, where previously you'd have to calculate a new field and then come up with some complicated Python expression to render those individually. Now you can do it in all one quick shot. The next tool that I wanted to show in the Enhanced Attributes category is the Append Attributes from Polygon tool. This is our attempt at trying to turn spatial joins into common language. For those of you who are already working in ArcMap, you're probably well familiar with how you use spatial joins. They typically get utilized in one of two ways in crime analysis. The first is to if you've got a point layer and you want to be able to append data from a polygon onto the point layer, you can do that. So if you've got, police precincts or police beats and you want to enrich a point layer with that data. And then the second is to be able to count points inside of a polygon. But the fact that a spatial join can operate points against polygons and polygons against points can often be confusing for analysts. So we've separated that capability into two distinct tools. The first of which is in this Enhanced Attributes group, and it's called Append Attributes from Polygon. Pretty simple language. Append attributes from Polygon. Okay, I want to append attributes from my police beats layer into my crime layer or my arrest layer. Pretty straightforward. So the tool is very simple. My input polygon features is police precinct. My input point features is my arrest data. And then I can pick the fields from my polygon data that I want to append. So in this case, the station name of the district. Pretty straightforward. I can run the tool. And then my output for that particular tool looks something like this. Let me just scoot this over. Here's my output table, and I can get that station name has, again, been appended into my original layer. It doesn't create a new output layer. That can really be a hassle for managing data. We've just appended that data back into your original data source, so it's just easier to use and work with. The last tool is the Enrich Layer tool. This is actually an out-of-the-box tool that comes with ArcGIS Pro. And we've added it here because it helps solve a very common problem that a lot of analysts often work with when performing problem-related analysis, where they need to calculate crime rates. And the problem is that geographic boundaries like these police beat layers that you see on this map don't really align well with the common geographies by which we capture data on population, so census blocks and tracts, for example. And figuring out for each of these police precincts exactly what the population is can be really difficult. And it makes it even harder when you've got some kind of target area for a focused intervention, whether it's for reducing crime or it's grant related. To be able to understand exactly what the population is in order to calculate crime or arrest rates or other statistical percentages can be really, really hard. So the Enrich Layer tool enables you to take your data set, which in this case would be my police precincts, and I can reach back into the Esri Living Atlas and consume data there and apply an apportionment algorithm that Esri has that's a scientific standard that will enable me to get a valid calculation of population in my precincts, even though they don't match up to census boundaries. So that's a very powerful tool. Now, the caveat for this particular tool is it does come from ArcGIS Online, so it does consume credits from your ArcGIS Online organization, or if you've been enabled and you're using ArcGIS Enterprise, it consumes them through ArcGIS Enterprise out into the ArcGIS Online service. So you have to be approved by your administrator to be able to utilize that capability, but it's there for you if you need it to be able to derive either population, demographic information, socioeconomic information of all types, or even consumer data associated with some kind of polygon that you need to calculate that for. So those are the new tools that are in our Enhanced Attributes section of the tool, meant to help you standardize some of the key data management challenges the analysts often run into. The other challenge the analysts often run into is the simple routine of regularly having to go and every morning get data that exists somewhere, maybe on a spreadsheet or on a network drive that's been dumped there off of a records management system or something like that, geocode that data and publish it in to either ArcGIS Enterprise or ArcGIS Online, or even just have it locally to be able to create maps and do analysis. We've created two tools here. One's called Setup Import, and the other one is called Import Records that help streamline that process for you. The first tool, called Setup Import, can be applied either to XY data or data that has addresses. And while this is a lot of different parameters that I'm showing you in this tool, at a high level, it really does just a couple of simple things. It's first asking you to create a configuration file that's going to have a common set of things that you want to do. First, where is the data? What's the name of the data and where is it located that you want to geocode? Where do you want to publish it to, either locally or a service in your enterprise portal or ArcGIS Online? It's going to say, hey, what's your unique identifier field? What is the date that you want to be, what's the field that you want to be kind of the way that the application looks for new records and it ensures that only new records are appended into your existing service? What are your address fields for geocoding? What address locator do you want to use? What's the structure of your data from a time perspective? And then if the data type is different, if the structure of your data is different between your source data, i.e. the spreadsheet or table, and the data in your, that's either on your local desktop or in your enterprise portal, we have some tools to do field mapping to be able to connect those two together. So basically, you input all of this stuff and you run it, and it's going to create a configuration file for you. And the value of that configuration file is now once you've built that, you don't have to manually every morning go in and go through all of those steps manually. You just come in the morning, you go to the Import Records tool, you point it to your configuration file, and then press Run, and it will do all the work for you. It'll go reach out to wherever your spreadsheet is located, it'll geocode it, and then it'll dump it to a local file wherever you described, and it'll also publish it into your enterprise portal or your ArcGIS Online organizational portal, whatever you describe, whatever you define. So it can really simplify that process of manually getting data, geocoding it, and publishing it so that it's ready to work. We added it in here so that you can do this manually, but on our solutions site, you can actually download a toolbox that contains these tools that enables you to work with them and export a Python script that can then be put into Windows Task Scheduler so that the entire process can be fully automated on a regular basis. So in the crime analysis tool, it's meant to help you do it, manually, but streamline that. If you want to automate it entirely, you can do that as well with the Import Records toolbox that's also available on our solutions site, and export that as a Python script that can then be automated in Windows Task Scheduler on your desktop. So a cool capability that really helps streamline the common workflow of ingesting data and just getting it ready to do the work that you have to do every day. From a selection standpoint, we've got a lot of the standard selection tools. So spatial selection, selecting by attributes, selections by location. There's nothing really new there. The one new custom tool that's in here is called Select by Date and Time. And what's really exciting about this particular tool is we've tried to take something that is often a source of pain for analysts, selecting by dates, and make it really simple. So no longer do you have to write a really long SQL expression. You can simply use the Select by Date and Time tool, point it to your data. You can operate a new selection, or you could even add or remove or select a subset if you've already made a selection using either of the other selection tools. You can apply the selection to either a time range. So if you have occur from and occur to dates and you want to operate against both of them, you can, or just a single date field. Doesn't really matter. And then you've got all sorts of checkbox options on how to approach doing this. So simple things like selecting by months, just picking the checkbox. Selecting by day of week, and we preset in weekday or weekend, or you can manually select the days of week that you want. So you can start to really build a compound date-time query in whatever way that you want, selecting by hours, whatever makes sense for you. And then when it comes to actually selecting by dates itself, we've got lots of different options. A date range, a single date, but then the ones that are most requested by analysts are the dynamic date ranges. So I can select by recency, and then I could pick the last 28 days for part of my CompStat or my monthly reporting process. I also have the ability to use another option here called by comparative time period. And the labeling on this is a little confusing, I know. Well, we can come up with a better idea. If you have a better idea for how to describe this, we will. We'd be glad to take it into account. The by comparative time period option lets you select the time period immediately before the time period that you define. So if you put 28 days in here, what this comparative time period option is going to do is select the 28 days prior to the current 28 days. Why does this matter? Well, it matters when you're doing those kinds of monthly statistical outputs, when you need to calculate percent changes, current period compared to previous period. The comparative time period option is what enables you to get a previous period without having to do the mental math of figuring out the specific date range and then querying that out to get that information. Now you can just do it here. Additionally, if you have live data or data that is, it's not kind of coming in on a nightly basis, but it's coming in live every hour, every minute, every half day, and you want to apply these tools in a more real-time format, you can. By default, all of these time range tools operate assuming that the first day is yesterday, because that's how we work, right? We get a nightly extract from the RMS, and then we do our analysis. But if you want, you can also click on a use current system time as end time capability. In this case, this is going to let you start your query at whatever your current system time is. So if you had, an AVL system or a calls for service system, and you needed to say, hey, show me everything in the last 4 hours, it would operate against the current time as part of your query. So this is a really rich, robust new tool that helps make date time selections in ArcGIS much, much simpler than they used to be. Doesn't require you to know nearly as much SQL. So it's a much more streamlined approach and option for you. So that's the new selection tool. I just want to make note of one other item that I think is cool that's out of the box in this selection area. I'm just gonna grab really quickly a selection of some of these crimes, and I wanted to note that there's a new capability in ArcGIS Pro that is enabled when you make a selection, and you can see it pop up here. It's called Layer from Selection. When I make a selection, and I've made this on my 2018 arrests layer over here, I can press this Layer from Selection button, and it'll create a new temporary layer. Now, this isn't creating a brand new feature class. It's just a temporary layer. But what's nice about this is that I now can clear my selection, continue working with my 2018 arrests, but I still can come back to this selection layer and work with it. So in some respects, it's behaving almost like a definition query that enables me to make selections and then have this temporary layer that I can work with. So it provides you a lot more flexibility when you're doing multiple selections on one source layer and you may need to kind of iterate against them. You can do that with this new Layer from Selection tool. That's why we put it here in the selection area, because we think it's very useful for you as you're doing a multiple selection scenario. So that's the kind of selection tools, the new Select by Date and Time tool. The next set of tools that I want to get into are our analysis tools. And we've taken our analysis data, our analysis tool set, and we've kind of broke it down into kind of two areas. And the first is tactical and strategic analysis. So the idea here is you're doing hotspot maps for either short-term tactical crime patterns or you're doing strategic analysis, problem analysis on long-term crime problems. And that's really what the tactical and strategic analysis tools are about. They're about identifying hotspots, large, small, statistical, and micro, and the investigative analysis tools over here are really helping you to understand spatial patterns that are relevant to case-specific purposes or investigative-specific purposes. At the first release, we've got a combination of new and out-of-the-box tools. The out-of-the-box tools are pretty common, so the ability to build summary statistics off of a tabular set of data, the ability to do buffers, and then we've got a series of brand new tools here. The first that I want to introduce you to is 80-20 analysis. If you're not familiar with 80-20 analysis, it's a common analytical method that's used in problem analysis to understand where risky locations are. The idea behind 80-20 analysis is that 20% of the locations are responsible for 80% of the events. You may also know this as Pareto analysis or the Pareto rule. The simple idea is that when you have events like call data or crimes, not every location is equally risky. Some have reoccurrences of events over and over and over again. And so that's what this tool helps us identify. What are the repeat locations in my jurisdiction that are disproportionately responsible for crime? So running this tool is pretty straightforward. So I've got some calls for service data. When I open up the tool, I import my input point features. I select my calls for service data, pick a name of a feature class for it to go. I can define a minimum cluster size. In this case, 1 is what I want. And then I can also, in the output layer, define any attributes that I want to preserve from the input layer. This is important because the current way that you do this in ArcGIS Pro is only through the Collect Events tool. And the Collect Events tool operates when you're trying to count multiple events at a single location. It only operates against the X and Y values of that location. But that's problematic for us as analysts because we want to be able to record the address so we know what specifically the location was that was the problem. So this enables us to do that, where I can now select full address. I can preserve any additional attributes from the data. And then if I know that I have some sort of funniness with how my geocoding is, and I want to incorporate a cluster tolerance where maybe I'm, essentially count anything that's within 10 feet of each other as being the same point, I could do that too. So I could, set a 10-foot cluster tolerance. By default, generally, I tend to run this without that. When I run this, the output of my tool looks like this. It's going to, by default, return me a graduated symbol layer. So you can see the largest, the locations with the largest number of events are the largest points. And it's also pre-labeling for me. So it's pre-labeling the top 20% of locations. So it's really easy to make a simple map that highlights the problem locations. And under the hood, this is what the table looks like on the right-hand side for this data. It provides me a count of each location, so I can click on the table and I can see, okay, the highest volume location was 776 South Route 59. It had 20 calls for service. I can see that that accounts for 2% of all crimes in this data set. But then the thing that's exciting is you also have this cumulative percentage field, which has been calculated based on a descending value from the most, the highest volume incident, location with incidents. So this helps me understand. So if I go down and I look at like number 20, this helps me understand that, okay, well, these 20 locations collectively are responsible for 25% of all incidents. So in this case, this is calls for service. If I was trying to reduce the number of calls for service in my jurisdiction to reduce officer burden and improve availability and response time, I might try to target these 20 locations for some kind of call reduction strategy so that I could achieve up to a 25% reduction in my total call volume. So a very cool tool, very applicable for understanding risky locations, performing strategic analysis, problem analysis on large volumes of data where you have risky locations. The next tool I want to show is the incident count tool. The incident count tool is the sister tool to the append attributes from polygon tool. So this is the reverse tool for spatial join. And again, this tool works really, really simply. It's simply saying, okay, you want to count up crimes, you want to count up incidents, great. What's the polygons you want to count against? In this case, it's my police precincts. What are the points that you want to join to that polygon? It's my arrests. Where do you want it to go? And then it will generate a count for you. Now, you'll notice at the end of that tool, there's one last option here called the category field. As I mouse over the tool help on it, you can see that it's listed as optional. This is an optional setting for this tool that is accessible for people who have ArcGIS Desktop Advanced licenses. So you don't have to have this. You don't have to have an ArcGIS Desktop Advanced license to use the tool, but if you want to use this parameter, and this requires the use of this particular, you have to use that Desktop Advanced license to use this particular parameter. What's cool about this parameter is that I can pick any field in my polygon or in my point data, and I can create a distinct count for each valid value in that field. So I'm counting arrests right now, and by default, the incident count tool is going to give me a sum of all arrests. But if I wanted a sum for each type of arrest, each crime type of arrest, I could go to this category field, press offense description, run the tool, and then this is what I'm going to get as an output. I'm going to get, by default, a graduated color map where deeper red is the highest volume total counts. I'm going to get a label. And then I'm also, if I open up the attribute table of this layer, I'm going to get, so here is my resulting layer. As you can see, it's counted up each individual arrest type and provided me a count for each district in my data set. So that's a really, really handy tool to simplify counting. This is useful for counting arrests or crimes by type. It's useful for counting large data sets by year. It's also providing that sum total count. So by default, you get the sum total count. If you have advanced licensing, you can do this kind of pivot table count where you can count by a distinct value in your data in your point data set. So that's the incident count tool. We've also put in a percent change tool, very common need in creating standard maps in policing. I've got one period, I need to compare it to a previous period by police boundary, precinct, beat, whatever. So what I've done here, I've got a second quarter of violent crimes, and then I've also got a third quarter of violent crimes. Those are the larger dots. And what I want to do is create percent change values for each precinct in my jurisdiction. I can run this percent change tool. My input current period is going to be my Q3 violent crimes. My previous period is going to be my second quarter violent crimes. My polygon layer for comparison is my police precincts. I can run my tool. And then the output of my tool is another graduated symbol map. The graduated symbol map goes from blue for reductions of more than 10% to red, increases of more than 10%, with a ready-to-use label that already shows me the percent change, and then the actual count volumes for the current period and the previous period. Pretty handy and easy. Definitely saves a lot of time for doing that calculation and building that information product on your own. The last new tool in the tactical and strategic analysis section is the density analysis area. Now this is important because this is a change for those of you who are already using Spatial Analyst from Esri UK. They've built in kernel density into that product, If you want to use kernel density here, you're using the out-of-the-box Esri licensing, which means you need to have spatial analyst extension. That's a required component, the required extension for doing kernel density analysis. So the kernel density tool itself is out of the box. There's a new tool in here called kernel density change. And what that enables us to do when we want to compare two kernel densities that we've run that have the exact same parameters in terms of search radius and cell size. In this case, I wanted to compare hotspots during the day, hotspots at nighttime. I can do that. So here's my nighttime hotspots, here's my daytime hotspots. And the result of the tool enables me to create a density change map where areas in red are the areas that got hotter during the nighttime, and in blue got colder during the daytime. Now that's the last of the custom tools in this section. There's also optimized hotspot, which is GEDIS or GI star for statistically significant hotspots. That's an out-of-the-box tool. And our new space-time analysis tools for bringing GEDIS ORD into a space-time continuum where you're able to look at spatial trends of statistically significant hotspots. Those are out-of-the-box tools. They're well documented in our documentation, so I'm not going to cover them today, and I know I'm running short on time. So I'm going to cover two last tools that are brand new that hopefully are really useful for you. In the investigative analysis section, the first one is called incident sequence. This simply enables you to take any layer that you have with a date field on it and run it so that, so in this case, this is a series of motor vehicle thefts. And the resulting output enables you to visualize the order in which those incidents occurred and creates linking lines. So very simple and easy to do. There's also a new tool called Incident Path. This enables you to connect two layers that share a common unique ID. In this case, in yellow, I have motor vehicle thefts. And in green, I have motor vehicle recovery locations. They both have the same offense ID, so I can select that. I run the tool, and my output for this tool is simply the linking lines that enable me to visualize the spatial movement relationships. This is applicable for motor vehicle thefts to recovery. It's applicable for financial transactions, cell phone callers and recipients of the call. So very useful and powerful tool for being able to visualize relationships between two data sets. This tool also works not on just one-to-one relationships, it also works on one-to-many relationships. Here I have some gang territories and I have a layer of gang member home locations. I can run the tool and it will create one-to-many relationships between the gang territory and the gang members to help me visualize intersections where these gang members come into contact with each other, or in this instance where we have a gang member who's in one gang living in the gang turf of a separate gang. So that's often referred to as a spider diagram. So those are the tools that are currently available, that are custom, that are out of the box for investigative analysis. And then lastly, we've got a variety of new tools for creating and sharing information, whether that's hard copy maps, web maps, or web layers. And you'll note under charting, there is a new chart option that's available as of ArcGIS Pro 2.2. It is a data clock. The good news on the data clock is it's there. The bad news is it does not yet support the most common form of data clock analysis that analysts do, which is time, hour of day, day of week. That's something that's a work in progress. Hopefully we have it at the next release. But this one enables you to do a number of other time periods in the meantime. So they're working on it, continuing to evolve it. So that's an overview of the crime analysis toolbar. I just want to, I'm going to jump really quick to my last slide. So what do you get when you deploy this particular toolbar? You're going to get this add-in that you double-click to install, and you're going to get an example ArcGIS Pro project that has all the exact same demonstration data that I've just shown you and output results on what they should look like. So that should help you kind of get comfortable with the tools before you even have to deal with your own data. You get this crime analysis toolbar solution by downloading it using our solution deployment tool for ArcGIS Pro. If you're not familiar with that tool, it's basically another add-in for ArcGIS Pro that gives you access to our complete library of solutions, so you can just click and it will deploy it into your ArcGIS Online or your ArcGIS Enterprise portal. And from there, you can download it and install it on your desktop. Just in terms of kind of some of the licensing issues, depending upon your network security structures, you may, like if you haven't deployed ArcGIS Pro yet, your agency administrator of your ArcGIS licensing has access to that, and they have the ability to get the installer files to download that. So contact your agency administrator to get those ArcGIS Pro set up on your computer. If you don't know your admin, either contact Dave or Pierre or Esri Customer Service, and we can help get you connected to be able to get access to ArcGIS Pro to get started. As far as requirements for ArcGIS Pro, one of the more important things is ArcMap and ArcGIS Pro can be deployed at the same time. So you don't have to choose either or. You can have both on your machine. The one thing that you need to be aware of is it really does require, it requires a 64-bit machine, which sometimes in law enforcement our computers can be a little bit behind. And the minimum is 4 gigs of RAM. And that'll be okay as long as you're not running any of the really robust stuff. But recommended is 8 gigs, with 16 gigs being the optimal for full performance for ArcGIS Pro. Last notes on licensing, as I mentioned before, you do need Spatial Analyst extension if you want to use either of those density tools. And several of the parameters, I showed you the incident count example, do require ArcGIS Desktop Advanced to take advantage of that additional functionality. The good news is if you have ArcGIS Basic or you have ArcGIS Standard, you can still use every other aspect of that tool except for that particular parameter. So it's only limiting your access to that specific use of the parameter. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Dave now, and Dave's going to talk a little bit about the differences between the crime analysis solution and for those of you who are using Esri UK's crime analyst extension.
Awesome. That's a lot of heavy lifting, Chris. Thanks a lot. Okay, so as Chris mentioned, I'm just going to do a quick run through of the crime analysis solution versus the crime analyst extension from Esri UK ArcMap. So Chris had already mentioned a lot of this already. If you have any other further questions, you can certainly contact us. But the key things to consider, obviously, that there are some features that require advanced licensing for ArcGIS Pro Desktop. So take that into consideration, and also along with the data clock enhancements that are still to come. But that said, the crime analyst solution has a number of great features and functions, as you just saw, that are not available in the crime analyst extension. The other thing to consider is also that the crime analyst extension is still supported, but the functionality will not be enhanced. So they won't be giving you new functionality in that crime analyst extension moving forward. The planned retirement for that crime analyst extension is December 2020, and that's subject to change. So always refer to Esri UK's product lifestyle page. The link is provided there, but if you go to their website, esriuk.com, you can do a search for it there as well. So all that said, taking all that into consideration, we are encouraging current customers to migrate to Pro and this crime analysis solution, but you can still use the extension and ArcMap at the same time. So certainly go ahead and do that. And for new customers, we certainly recommend going directly to ArcGIS Pro and this crime analyst solution. All right, so I'm going to, I think, get Chris and Pierre to talk really briefly about related resources. So I think, Chris, you're off first here, so hand the control back to you.
just a couple of really quick things. I know we're running out of time, but we already have a free training lesson on part of the functionality for the crime analysis toolbar. You'll find it at learn.arcgis.com. It's a free training lesson. It's called Prepare and Present Crime Statistics for a CompStat meeting. You can use that today and learn a little bit about the crime analysis toolbar and how to apply it in a workflow. And also, we are currently working on a web course series. So this will be a series of self-guided web courses that will be through our training.esri.com website, which you have access to for free if you are on maintenance with Esri. That'll be coming out later this year. I'm also headed over to California for the International Association of Crime Analysts Conference, where we'll be doing a whole series of user workshops involving this particular tool. So if you're heading out next week to that, come say hi and come join one of our workshops. And we'll also be presenting and doing workshops on this tool throughout 2019 to help you get up to speed and familiar with it. Generally, we also have Esri hosts a monthly public safety webinar series that you can find at esri.com/pswebinars. All sorts of different public safety topics. A lot of exciting content there, new every month, and in addition, all of the library of previous public safety webinars are available there for you to use. Pierre, did you want to mention your next webinar?
Yes, thank you, Chris. Yes, on the 22nd of November, I'm going to be hosting a webinar with Brian Laz, our new technical solutions specialist for the NCR region. It's on a new product that was just released last August, or this August. It's the ArcGIS, particularly the new intelligence configuration for ArcGIS Pro or ICAP. It's a customized desktop environment designed specifically for intelligence analysts that streamline the user experience. It provides new tools. And in addition to the new tools, the new intelligence workflow, it also includes the military tools, the crime analysis tool that you saw today, and some imagery tools, all in the same desktop pro environment. So during this webinar, we'll show you how to integrate multiple sources of information, create intelligence products, and how to share them to you throughout your organization with dynamic web maps and applications. So 22nd of November, and you can go to the Esri Canada webinar webpage to register. Back to you, Dave.
Excellent. Thanks, Pierre. I think there's a registration link coming up following all of this as well. So this leads us to questions, and we do have several questions that came in. Some of them I've answered directly, privately through the chat. So thank you very much for everybody in attendance, and have a good rest of your day.